Number 1. Sandal Hornia. At 10:30 in the morning on September 2nd, 2019, a man carrying a cardboard box and wearing a high-visibility jacket rang the doorbell of a home on Montrose Avenue in Luton, England. A 14-year-old girl answered the door. The moment she opened, he punched her in the face hard enough to fracture her eye socket, pushed his way inside, and did not stop until he had put 2 of the 3 women in that house unconscious on the floor. He was gone in under 5 minutes. That evening, he was at Luton Airport boarding a flight to Romania. The house on Montrose Avenue was home to a Chinese family. 3 of them were in that morning: the grandmother, her adult daughter, and a 14-year-old girl. The rest of the family were out. There was nothing about the address that made it an obvious target from the outside. But the family who lived there was known in the area as affluent. For Hornia, that was reason enough to knock on the door. He showed up with a prop, an empty cardboard box, and a high-visibility jacket that made him look like every other delivery driver moving through the neighborhood that morning. He rang the bell and waited. When the 14-year-old opened the door, she had no reason to be suspicious. A man in a work jacket with a parcel in his hands is not a threat. She probably started to reach for the box when Hornia punched her. She had no time to process what was happening. The punch fractured her eye socket and she went down. Hornia stepped over her and moved into the hallway, where the grandmother was already coming toward the noise. He hit her once in the head and she dropped. He grabbed both of them by whatever he could reach and dragged them across the hallway floor into the kitchen. The grandmother was still screaming as he dragged her. She screamed until she could not anymore. The aunt heard the commotion and came running down the stairs. Hornia met her in the hallway and punched her 5 times in the head before pushing her into the kitchen with the others. All 3 were now on the kitchen floor. The grandmother was unconscious, 2 bleeds forming on her brain, multiple fractures across her face. The 14-year-old had a fractured eye socket and a fractured cheek. The aunt was still conscious but had taken 5 punches to the head. Hornia left them there and walked into the living room. He was looking for the CCTV hard drive. He knew the house had a camera system. He had seen it when he came through the door, and he wanted to take the footage with him. He found what he thought was it, grabbed it along with a satellite television decoder and a Nintendo Wii console, and walked out the front door. But what he took wasn't the CCTV hard drive. It was a game console. The actual CCTV system was still running on the wall behind him, recording everything from the moment the door opened to the moment he left. He left on foot, made his way across Luton, and arrived at Luton Airport that evening. CCTV there caught him in the terminal moving through the departure gate. He boarded a flight to Romania and was gone before anyone outside that house had a clear picture of who he was. The family posted the footage online the same day. A relative uploaded the CCTV to Facebook and offered a £20,000 reward for information leading to the attacker's ID. Within hours, it was across local Facebook groups, then national news, then international coverage. Thousands of people shared it. The footage was clear enough that anyone who knew Hornia would recognize him instantly. Bedfordshire police had already launched their investigation, but the posting created an immediate problem. Detective Sergeant Tom Ham, who led the manhunt, later said the footage going public made Hornia a massive flight risk. The investigation was already moving, and now the suspect knew exactly how much evidence existed against him and exactly how many people were looking for him. Officers had to hasten their entire operation before they were ready. On February 11th, 2021, 17 months after the attack, Romanian authorities located Hornia and took him into custody. Bedfordshire police worked with the Romanian embassy and Romanian law enforcement to process the extradition. On March 27, 2021, Sandal Hornia was put on a flight back to the United Kingdom. He appeared before Luton Magistrates Court on April 6th, where he was remanded in custody. He entered guilty pleas at 2 separate hearings. At Luton Crown Court, before he was sentenced, the court heard from the women he attacked. The grandmother had remained in hospital until September 9th, a week after the attack. She was still experiencing dizziness and memory loss in the months that followed. The 14-year-old underwent 2 separate surgeries on her eye. The aunt, who had refused treatment at the hospital the day of the attack because she was too concerned about her niece and mother to think about herself, told the court in her victim impact statement that she was now scared to open her own front door. On October 14th, 2021, Judge Bishop sentenced Hornia to 11 years in prison for the robbery, with the remaining sentences for the assaults running at the same time. He also designated Hornia a dangerous offender, a classification that adds a 5-year supervision period on top of the prison term, meaning that even after he is released, he can be pulled back into custody at any point, up to 2037. Number 2. Alonzo Mingo. 3 men stepped out of a blue Nissan Altima outside a house on 94th Avenue Northwest in Coon Rapids, Minnesota, just after noon on January 26, 2024. The man in front was Alonzo Mingo. He was wearing a UPS uniform and carrying a cardboard box. The 2 men behind him were brothers, Demetrius and Omari Shumpert, and they were armed. Alonzo walked up to the door alone, because a family is far more likely to open the door for one delivery driver than for 3 men standing together on the porch. Alonzo had worked for UPS as a seasonal employee, and when his contract ended, he kept the shirt and the vest. The box he carried was a prop. There was nothing to deliver. He drove to that specific house because he believed there was a large amount of cash inside, and he chose the one disguise almost guaranteed to get him through a stranger's front door without resistance. Inside the house were 5 people: Shannon Jungworth, her husband, Mario Trejo Estrada, Shannon's 20-year-old son, Jorge Reyes Jungworth, and 2 small children. Jorge was not supposed to be home that afternoon. He worked a landscaping job, but his employer gave him the day off because work was slow. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The moment the door opened, Alonzo forced his way inside and pulled out a gun. The 2 Shumpert brothers came in right behind him. What happened next was captured on the family's security cameras. Another camera across the street already recorded the blue Nissan pulling up and the 3 men walking to the house. Alonzo forced Mario through the house at gunpoint and into a bedroom where Shannon was with the 2 little boys. He pointed the gun at both parents and demanded money. Then he pushed the 2 adults and the 2 children back out of the bedroom, into the rest of the house, and brought Shannon back in alone. He shot her in the head at point-blank range. Seconds later, the 2-year-old wandered into the bedroom and stood over his mother, crying. In another part of the house, Omari found Jorge. He fought back, but Omari struck him with the pistol and then shot him in the head. Demetrius, armed and moving through the rooms, forced one of the victims to pull open drawers and cabinets while the men kept demanding money. By the time the 3 of them walked back out the front door, Shannon, Mario, and Jorge were dead, each one shot in the head. Mario in the doorway, Jorge in the office, Shannon in the bedroom. The 2 children were left alive inside the house. Someone inside the house managed to dial 911 and left the line open without ever speaking. The dispatcher could not get a response. That open line was enough. Police were sent to the house on 94th Avenue Northwest within minutes. When officers arrived at the home, they found the 3 adults dead and the 2 children unharmed. The children were safely taken from the scene. An alert was issued for the vehicle. Later that same day, police pulled over a blue Nissan Altima in Fridley, Minnesota, matching the one captured on the poll camera. The driver was Alonzo Mingo. Inside the vehicle, in a backpack, officers recovered a UPS uniform top and vest. Investigators would later match fingerprints lifted from the cardboard box left at the house to Alonzo's. When questioned, he told law enforcement 2 things. He said he had never worked at UPS, and he said he had been home all day. Both statements were false, and both were contradicted by the evidence already in police custody: his employment records, the uniform in his own backpack, the fingerprints on the box, and the footage of his face inside the house. The reason 3 people died in that house wasn't because of the family as a whole. It came down to one person. For 3 months before the murders, Mario Trejo Estrada had been under active investigation by a Twin Cities violent crime enforcement team. In October of 2023, investigators suspected him of trafficking cocaine, fentanyl, and methamphetamine. They placed a tracking device on his vehicle. They documented frequent trips to storage facilities. After the murders, law enforcement searched a storage unit Mario rented in Golden Valley and recovered psilocybin mushrooms, marijuana, methamphetamine, and an unidentified white powder. Trash from a second storage facility tested positive for cocaine, fentanyl, and methamphetamine. Financial records showed that Mario and Shannon had wired large amounts of money. multiple times, to various people in Mexico. Mario had 2 prior drug convictions, one in Minnesota, one in Wisconsin for felony possession of cocaine with intent to sell. The criminal complaints filed against the 3 men never formally stated a motive, but the search warrants told the story investigators believed that Alonzo targeted the house specifically because he knew, or believed, that a significant quantity of drug money was inside, and that the entire operation was a robbery based on that belief. The children, the security cameras, and the presence of a 20-year-old who was only home by accident were not part of the plan. They were simply there. The cases were tried separately, and they took more than a year and a half to resolve. Alonzo Mingo was tried first. In the late summer of 2025, an Anoka County jury found him guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder, along with additional counts of aiding and abetting and second-degree murder. On September 11, 2025, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the mandatory sentence under Minnesota law for any first-degree murder conviction. Demetrius Shumpert was convicted on all counts in November of 2025. His younger brother, Omari, was convicted on most counts the following month. In January of 2026, both brothers were sentenced. Each received 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole, one for each person who died in that house. All 3 men are now serving life. None of them will ever be released. Number 3. Jorge Lachazo. On the morning of August 19, 2019, 75-year-old Evelyn Udell let 2 delivery men into her home in Boca Raton, Florida, to install a washer and dryer she had purchased from Best Buy. 40 minutes later, she was on the floor of her laundry room with a fractured skull, 2nd and 3rd degree burns across more than half her body, and her clothes melted into her skin. She was rushed to Delray Medical Center, where surgeons operated on her brain that night. She died the following morning. The man who killed her was already driving away in the delivery truck when the first responders arrived. The 2 men arrived that morning with the appliances loaded in the truck and a work order on the manifest. There was nothing about the job that looked different from any other stop on the route. They carried the machines into the house, ran the connections in the laundry room, and finished the installation. When the job was done, Gonzalez stepped outside to make a call. Lachazo stayed behind under the pretense of showing Udell how to use the new appliances. Gonzalez was standing outside by the truck when he heard screaming coming from inside the house. He ran back in and found Evelyn Udell on the floor of the laundry room, unconscious and bleeding, her clothes on fire, and her skin already beginning to burn. A wooden-handled mallet was sitting on top of the washing machine, still covered in blood. The room smelled of chemicals. Gonzalez stepped back outside and called 911. While he was on the call, Lachazo got into the delivery truck and drove away alone. What happened in the time between Gonzalez walking out and the screaming starting did not take long to piece together. Lachazo used the mallet to beat Udell in the head. When she did not die, he walked to her garage, found a can of acetone on the shelf, carried it back to the laundry room, and poured it on her body. At some point before he left, he went through her purse and wallet. Then he got in the truck and drove away. Boca Raton Fire Rescue found Evelyn unconscious on the laundry room floor, her clothes fused to her skin, her body still burning as paramedics worked to extinguish the flames. More than 50% of her body burned. She was transported to Delray Medical Center, where surgeons operated on her brain that night. She did not survive the surgery. Jorge Lachazo lived in Hialeah and worked for a third-party logistics company contracted by Best Buy to handle appliance deliveries across South Florida. He was a subcontractor who had been with the company for nearly 2 years, going into people's homes every day to install the appliances they ordered. That is the only reason he was ever inside Evelyn Udell's house. A responding officer spotted the delivery truck and pulled it over a short distance from Evelyn's home. Lachazo was behind the wheel, sweating and shaking, with a burn on his shirt from the fire he set before he left. He was taken to Boca Raton Regional Hospital to be treated for his injuries, then transported to the Boca Raton Police Department for questioning. The interrogation ran for more than 2 hours. Lachazo admitted he used the mallet. He admitted he went to the garage for the chemical. At some point during the questioning, he pulled his knees to his chest and curled into himself in the chair. He told the detectives he made a mistake and asked them to kill him. He said he was 21 years old and had thrown his life away. The attorneys believed the crime scene photographs and autopsy images were too graphic for a jury to weigh without emotion, driving the verdict. The defense did not deny the attack. They argued it was not premeditated, that Lachazo did not walk into that house intending to kill anyone, that the voices he described were real to him, that the cocaine and marijuana he used earlier that morning clouded his judgment, and that what happened in that laundry room was impulsive rather than planned. On January 25, 2023, Judge Weiss convicted Lachazo of first-degree murder with a weapon, burglary with assault or battery while armed, and first-degree arson. He was acquitted on the robbery charge. The murder conviction carried an automatic life sentence. Sentencing was scheduled for April. On April 5, 2023, the family told Judge Weiss that a lethal injection was too kind. They wanted him to rot. Judge Weiss sentenced Lachazo to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus 30 years for the arson conviction. He was 24 years old at sentencing. He will die in prison. Number 4. Ronald Lee Haskell. Ronald Lee Haskell pulled up to a house on Leaflet Lane in Spring, Texas, on the afternoon of July 9, 2014, wearing a FedEx uniform he bought specifically for that day. He was not there to deliver anything. He was there because the woman who helped his ex-wife leave him lived at that address, and he had made a decision, months earlier, about what he intended to do about it. Not only did Ronald disguise himself as a FedEx delivery driver, he also brought a 9mm handgun stolen from a former girlfriend in Utah, more than 200 rounds of ammunition, and a white pillow duct-taped around the barrel of the gun, specifically to muffle the sound of what he was about to do. 15-year-old Cassidy Stay and her 4 younger siblings were home when Ronald came knocking. Their parents, Stephen and Katie, had stepped out on an errand. Cassidy answered the door and found a man in a FedEx uniform standing outside. At first, she did not recognize him. He was a distant relative from a side of the family she rarely saw, and enough time had passed that he looked different from how she remembered. He asked whether her parents were home. She told him they were out but expected back within the hour. He said he would return, turned, and walked away from the porch. A few minutes later, he came back. This time, when Cassidy moved to close the door, Ronald pushed his weight against it and forced his way inside. He subdued her and tied her up. He moved through the house and gathered all 4 other children into the living room, holding them at gunpoint. Then he sat down and waited. Stephen and Katie arrived home not long after, walking through their own front door without knowing what was waiting inside. Ronald ambushed them and took them into the living room, where their 5 children were already being held at gunpoint. Once all 7 were together, Ronald looked directly at Katie and told her he had come for his children. Then he began asking the same question over and over. Where was Melanie? Stephen and Katie told him they didn't know. That was the truth. Melanie wasn't there and had never been. Ronald continued pacing through the room before ordering all 7 family members onto the floor. That's when Katie realized what was about to happen. She suddenly jumped to her feet and rushed toward him. Ronald shot her first. As Cassidy watched her mother fall from the gunshot, she covered her ears and began to scream. Ronald moved through the room, one after another, shooting each family member in the back of the head. When Ronald reached her, he pressed the gun to the back of her head and fired. The bullet struck her hand first, the one she had pressed against her ear, before grazing and fracturing her skull. The force was enough to fracture bone, but not enough to kill her. She lay on the floor and did not move until she was certain he was gone. When she finally opened her eyes, she saw her father's body on the floor. It was holding Zach. She got up, found a phone, and called 911. She told the dispatcher that her entire family had been shot. She gave them Ronald's name. Then she shared the most important piece of information she had. Before leaving the house, Ronald had said where he was going next. He was on his way to her grandparents' home. Cassidy warned the dispatcher that if police didn't get there first, he would do it all over again. To understand what just happened inside that house on Leaflet Lane, we need to understand who Ronald Haskell was and what finally pushed him over the edge. Ronald married Melanie K. Lyon on March 15, 2002, in Orange County, California. The couple eventually relocated to Logan, Utah, where they settled and had children. By 2008, the marriage began to fall apart. That year, Melanie contacted police in Cache County, to report that Ronald dragged her from their bed by her hair and struck her in the side of the head. Ronald was charged with domestic violence, simple assault, and committing an act of violence in front of children. He pleaded guilty to the misdemeanor assault charge. The charges were later dropped under a plea arrangement. He told police during the investigation that he only pushed her and that he had been under stress from work. The abuse didn't stop. It continued for years, often in ways that didn't leave visible injuries. Melanie later testified at trial that Ronald isolated her from her family, controlled what she said and who she spoke to, and repeatedly told her that if she ever left him, her family would pay for it. By the summer of 2013, Melanie had reached a point where she could no longer stay. On July 8, 2013, she filed for a protective order against Ronald. The following month, she filed for divorce. It was Katie Stay who helped Melanie get out. After Melanie decided to leave Ronald, Katie drove from Spring, Texas to Logan, Utah to help her pack. She loaded Melanie and the children into a vehicle and brought them back to Texas, closer to family and farther away from Ronald. Ronald's divorce was finalized on February 14, 2014 on Valentine's Day. The court restricted him to supervised visitation with his own children only and required a psychological evaluation before any unsupervised access could be granted. He moved out of Utah and went to live with his parents in California. He stopped working for his FedEx contractor that same month, January of 2014. What Ronald did over the next several months became clear after investigators pieced together his movements. He got hold of a FedEx uniform. During a stop in Utah, he stole a 9mm handgun from a former girlfriend. He bought more than 200 rounds of ammunition and wrapped a pillow around the barrel of the gun with duct tape. Then, in early July of 2014, he got into his vehicle and started driving toward Texas. Ronald arrived in Spring, about 2 days before the attack. During that time, he watched the house on Leaflet Lane and learned the family's routine. The Stays had no idea he was there. Melanie wasn't living at the house, and there is no evidence that anyone had been warned he was coming. So when Cassidy answered the door on July 9th and saw a man in a FedEx uniform, she had no reason to be suspicious. That was the plan all along. Cassidy's 911 call reached law enforcement while Ronald was still driving. Officers were dispatched simultaneously to Leaflet Lane and to the home of the grandparents. They found Ronald's vehicle before he could reach her grandparents' house. When officers tried to stop him, Ronald drove away. The pursuit ended when a spike strip flattened his tires and forced his vehicle to a stop in a nearby cul-de-sac. Police surrounded the car and boxed it in from both ends. What followed was a standoff that lasted about 3 hours. At some point during the standoff, he dialed 911 himself. When the operator answered and asked for the nature of his emergency, he said he had 20 police officers pointing guns at him. When asked where he was, he said he was certain they already knew. When asked his name, he gave the same answer every time. He said he was one of many. He never explained what he meant. Negotiators worked the scene throughout the standoff, repeatedly asking him to exit the vehicle. He did not comply for the better part of 3 hours. Then, around 10 o'clock that evening, the car door opened. Ronald stepped out onto the pavement, lowered himself to his knees, and surrendered. He was taken into custody without further incident. Inside or near the vehicle, police recovered the weapon, the remaining ammunition, and evidence consistent with everything Cassidy described in her call. He was booked that night on 6 counts of capital murder. He has been held without bond from the date of his arrest. Ronald's trial did not begin until August 26, 2019, 5 years after the murders on Leaflet Lane. Over those 5 years, the case was delayed again and again. Court dates were pushed back, attorneys changed, and the trial was reset multiple times. For the Stay family, justice would not come quickly. They waited more than 5 years for the case to finally reach a jury. When the trial finally began, Ronald appeared in court in a wheelchair. He often looked heavily medicated, and at one point he even collapsed during a hearing. His defense team argued that this was evidence of severe mental illness. Their entire case rested on an insanity defense. They told the jury that Ronald suffered from schizoaffective disorder and bipolar disorder, and that voices in his head had convinced him that killing the Stay family would somehow bring Melanie and the children back to him. A psychiatrist called by the defense testified that Ronald could not tell right from wrong when the murders happened. Prosecutors disagreed, and over the course of the trial, they set out to show that Ronald knew exactly what he was doing. The jury spent about 8 hours deliberating over 2 days before reaching a verdict. On September 26, 2019, they returned to the courtroom and delivered a verdict of guilty on all capital murder charges. The insanity defense was rejected in its entirety. Ronald showed no visible reaction when the verdict was read. The penalty phase followed. Jurors were given 2 options: life in prison without the possibility of parole or death by lethal injection. They deliberated for approximately 4 hours. On October 11, 2019, the jury sentenced Ronald Lee Haskell to death. Ronald Lee Haskell remains on death row at the Allen Polunsky Unit in Livingston, Texas. His conviction is under automatic appeal review by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, as required in all capital cases in the state. No execution date has been set. Number 5. Gregory Bender. Gregory Bender called Patrick de Lacerda's father just after 7 in the morning on February 27, 2018, claiming to be a delivery driver with a package that needed a signature. He was not a delivery driver, and there was no package. He was a hedge fund manager who spent months planning to kill Patrick, and the call was the first step in getting him to walk out his own front door. The call went to Max de Lacerda, Patrick's father. There was a sign at the end of the family's long, wooded driveway in Deltona, Florida, telling delivery drivers to call Max's number before dropping anything off. Gregory used it and asked for Patrick by name. Max was more than an hour away on a construction job that morning, and something about the call sat wrong with him. The driver wanted Patrick specifically. When Max offered to have Patrick call back, the driver refused to leave a number. Max would later describe the whole thing as a series of red flags he only understood after it was too late. What Gregory knew, and what made the entire plan work, was that Patrick was actually waiting for a delivery. He had ordered a custom engagement ring for his fiancée, Jessica Devnani, the woman he planned to marry. So when word came that a package was on its way, Patrick had no reason to think twice. He walked to his own front door, expecting the ring that was going to start the rest of his life. At the door, Gregory was waiting for him. The moment Patrick opened up, Gregory shot him 4 times and left him there, the front door hanging open and glass scattered across the entry. Then he removed the home's surveillance footage and drove away. The reason a hedge fund manager drove across 2 counties to kill a 25-year-old he barely knew started about a year earlier. Gregory and Jessica met in 2009 when he was still married, and she was nearly 20 years younger than him. They stayed together on and off for about 8 years, and the whole time Gregory kept promising to leave his wife, Damara Sanchez, and never did. Jessica finally ended it. Not long after, she met Patrick de Lacerda, fell for him, and the 2 of them got engaged. Gregory could not let it go. He started calling, then messaging, and the messages turned into threats, aimed at both Jessica and Patrick, going on for months. It got bad enough that Jessica took it to a judge, who granted a restraining order against Gregory and ordered him to surrender his gun collection. For a little while, the messages stopped. Jessica thought that meant it was over. It was not. The silence was not Gregory letting go. It was Gregory planning something darker. He filled a blue spiral notebook with the details of how he was going to kill Patrick. It contained Patrick's address, hand-drawn maps of the property, notes about the house, and even about the family dog. He worked out how he would get away with it too, writing down the steps one by one. Change his clothes, swap the license plate on his car, use burner phones, get rid of the gloves and the tracker when it was done. His first idea was to kill Patrick with a lethal injection. Somewhere along the way, he changed his mind and decided to shoot him instead. On the morning of February 27, 2018, Jessica's phone rang. It was Gregory, calling for the first time in months. She did not pick up, but the moment she saw his name, she knew something was wrong. She got in her car and drove straight to Patrick's house. She was too late. By the time she pulled up, Patrick was already on the ground, dead. Jessica told the police exactly who she thought did it. She walked them through all of it: the years with Gregory, the threats, the restraining order, the call that came in that morning. Investigators were already leaning the same way. The scene was too angry and too deliberate to be a robbery or some stranger passing through. Whoever did this came for Patrick specifically. But leaning toward a suspect was not the same as proving it, and there was nothing at that doorway that put Gregory there. Then, two things changed that. The first was the phone call itself. By calling Jessica that morning, Gregory violated the restraining order, and that gave police the grounds to arrest him and search his home. The second was Gregory's own wife. Damara Sanchez, still legally married to him during the entire time he was seeing Jessica, asked to meet a detective in a quiet parking lot. She was nervous. She told him she had seen the news and that the murder sounded exactly like notes she had once found written in her husband's spiral notebook. When investigators searched Gregory's home, they found what they needed in the trash. Inside a wastebasket were two crumpled pieces of paper covered in handwriting. They carried Patrick's address, drawings of his property, and instructions on how to get in, get out, and erase every trace. One line read, in part, "Dispose of clothes, plate, tracker, gloves." The only fingerprints on the pages were Gregory's. Nearby, investigators found live ammunition and a spent shell casing. The casing matched the ones left at the doorway where Patrick died. They were fired by the same gun. Gregory had planned for almost everything: the clothes, the plate, the phones, the surveillance tapes. He thought through how to erase the murder from existence. The one thing he never did was empty his own trash. His trial began on May 25th, 2021. The defense argued the writings were just fantasy, the private musings of a bitter man, and that police had searched his home illegally. They took about 2 hours to find Gregory Bender guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. The judge sentenced him that same day to the only punishment the conviction allowed: life in prison, with no possibility of parole. Gregory Bender is still in a Florida prison, where he will stay for the rest of his life. Number 6. Donovan Carter. Donovan Carter drove more than an hour from his place in Gwinnett County to the Harlow Apartments in Marietta, Georgia, dressed as an Amazon delivery driver. It was around 10:30 in the morning on January 3rd, 2024, broad daylight in a busy complex near the corner of Cobb Parkway and Windy Hill Road. He parked his own car at a quick trip down the road and walked the rest of the way in a blue vest and a face mask, holding a phone instead of a package. He was not there to deliver anything. The man he came for was Kenneth Cunningham II. What Kenneth did not know was that his name and his address were already in Carter's head long before that morning. Carter knew what complex he lived in. He knew which entrance he used. He knew how the package room worked. He had been to that property the night before, just to learn the layout. He came back the next day with a delivery vest and a plan. When Donovan got to the complex, he texted Kenneth from a number he spun up through one of those temporary number apps, so it would not trace back to him, and told him a package was waiting downstairs. Kenneth was turning 40 that day, and a man turning 40 expects things to show up at his door. Besides, he was waiting on a real package that still hadn't come. So when the text said one was downstairs, he believed it, and he went down to get it. Donovan was waiting near the package room when Kenneth stepped outside. He moved on him fast. Kenneth realized what was happening and tried to run, and Donovan shot him in the back, again and again, as he tried to get away. Kenneth went down just outside his own apartment building and died there on the ground. After shooting Kenneth, Donovan didn't stick around. He walked away from the scene, took off the Amazon vest, and threw it away nearby. Then he made his way to a quick trip down the road, where he left his car. From there, he drove more than an hour back to Gwinnett County, as if he could simply put the entire morning behind him. The woman at the center of it dated Donovan first. When she ended things, she moved on and began dating Kenneth, and Donovan could not live with it, but he never targeted her. Instead, he went after the man who took the place he still believed was his. The woman they both dated knew nothing about any of it, and investigators cleared her completely. The mistake Donovan made was thinking the disguise would protect him. The Amazon vest that got Kenneth to come downstairs also made Donovan easy to remember. He made matters worse by throwing it away near the scene. As investigators searched the area, they found the discarded vest. Security cameras around the apartment complex also captured both the shooting and the vehicle Donovan used to leave. Within hours, police had identified Donovan and traced him to an address in Gwinnett County. That same evening, officers pulled him over during a traffic stop and arrested him. Before 11 o'clock that night, he was booked into the Cobb County Jail and was being held without bond. His case did not drag on for years the way some do. In April of 2025, a jury convicted Donovan Carter of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Cobb County Superior Court Judge Julie Jacobs sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 5 years. Number 7. Jazz Reed. On the evening of November 24th, 2024, an 8-year-old girl was sitting in the front passenger seat of a car on Southern Row in Ladbroke Grove, London, celebrating her birthday with her family. Her father was in the car with her. Jazz Reed cycled up to the vehicle on an e-bike, dressed head to toe as a Deliveroo delivery rider, and fired 11 shots into it. 5 hit her father in the back, chest, abdomen, and pelvis. 2 hit her in her foot and lower body. Both survived, but her father will likely never walk again. She developed OCD and stopped going outside. Reed was 33 years old and had done this twice before. Reed had been hunting that man for weeks. 6 weeks earlier, on October 9th, he showed up at a home in Notting Hill and shot a 27-year-old man named Emil Buncombe in the thigh at his front door. On November 11th, he turned up at an address in Nottingdale connected to the 34-year-old and fired 4 shots at the building. By the time he found the same man parked on Southern Row on the evening of November 24th, he had used the disguise twice and walked away clean both times. He knew the routine worked. He knew nobody had connected the incidents. He had no reason to think this time would be any different. The family in the car had no idea he was coming. Every time Reed went out to shoot someone, the routine was the same. He left his home in Uxbridge in a hired car and drove across London to a flat on the Swinbrook estate in North Kensington that he used as a staging point. His Deliveroo equipment was stored there: the green rucksack, the takeaway box, the modified e-bike, kept away from his home address, deliberately. He would arrive, change into the disguise, get on the bike, and cycle to wherever his target was. After each shooting, he swapped his SIM card, discarded his burner phone, and changed vehicles for the drive back to Uxbridge. On the evening of November 24th, he followed the same routine: drove from Uxbridge, changed at the flat, got on the bike, found the car, then fired 11 shots and cycled away. The family sat in that car with nowhere to go. The father took 5 rounds to the back, chest, abdomen, and pelvis and was rushed to hospital in critical condition. The 8-year-old was hit in her foot and lower body. Both of them survived, but surviving and recovering are 2 different things. The father's injuries were severe enough that he is unlikely to ever walk again. The girl stopped going outside after that night. She developed OCD. After November 24th, her life was never the same. 2 days later, Metropolitan Police officers searched Reed's home in Uxbridge and found a 9mm self-loading pistol buried beneath a concrete paving slab in the rear garden, still loaded with 17 live rounds. His DNA was on the grip and on the muzzle. Forensic analysis confirmed it as the weapon fired on Southern Row. His partial DNA was also on bullet casings recovered from the Nottingdale scene. The e-bike and the Deliveroo disguise were still at the Swinbrook estate flat, exactly where he left them. Exactly why Reed targeted that particular 34-year-old man was never fully established at trial. The shootings happened on 3 separate occasions, but prosecutors were never able to prove a clear motive. During sentencing, the judge suggested the possibility that Reed had carried out the attacks on behalf of someone else, essentially acting as a hired gun for a person who wanted the victim dead. There were also references to possible gang associations in the probation report. However, prosecutors said they found no evidence linking Reed to any specific gang, and no evidence that the shootings were gang-related in the traditional sense. He told the jury that the gun recovered from beneath a concrete slab outside his home had been planted there. According to Reed, people he owed a 10,000-pound drug debt were trying to frame him. He claimed they hid the weapon at his address and were responsible for the shootings. On November 6, 2025, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts: attempted murder of the father, wounding with intent of the daughter, wounding with intent of Emil Buncombe on October 9th, 3 counts of possession of a firearm with intent to endanger life, Judge Sarah Whitehouse told Reed that no sentence she could pass could undo the damage caused to the victim's family. She told him the shootings could have been contract killings, that he may have been carrying them out for someone else, for money, for reasons he still refused to explain. She noted that his refusal to acknowledge what he did or provide any explanation for it made the danger he posed to the public worse, not better. She sentenced Jazz Reed to 38 years in prison, with a further 5 years on extended license. Reed is currently serving that sentence. Number 8. Hayes Edmunds and Sam Audouar. Two men knocked on the front door of a home on Dunn Avenue in Stamford, Connecticut at 11:30 in the morning on January 12, 2026. They were wearing Amazon-style delivery vests. They were carrying loaded handguns. When the homeowner answered the door, he saw what appeared to be delivery workers and heard the words "package" and "signature." Nothing about the encounter seemed unusual. As he reached for the package, one of the men pulled out a silver handgun and pointed it at his face. Before he could react, the second man had already pushed past him and was moving through the house toward his wife. The husband immediately realized what was happening. He shouted upstairs to his wife, telling her to call 911 and lock herself in the bedroom. But the second intruder was already moving through the house. The husband was pistol whipped in the face and head, struck multiple times while standing in his own hallway. His wife looked downstairs from the landing and saw it happening. Before she could move, the second man was already coming up the stairs toward her. He grabbed her by the neck, threw her onto the bed, and pressed a pillow over her face, but she had managed to call 911 before he reached her. The line was still open, and dispatchers heard everything. At some point during the attack, the husband reached the home's panic alarm and activated it. The moment the audible alarm began sounding through the house, both men stopped what they were doing and ran. They fled on foot towards Cedar Heights Road, leaving the husband and wife behind in the house, both injured, but they survived. One of the men ducked into a nearby pizzeria and asked for a bottle of water. He was out of breath, pacing, on his phone, asking someone where they were. At one point, he moved toward the back of the restaurant looking for a way out. A worker behind the counter watched all of it. When the man walked out and got into a white car on the street, the worker followed him to the door and wrote down the license plate. Within minutes, Stamford police had the plate number they needed. Officers soon located the white vehicle on Cedar Heights Road and attempted a traffic stop. Instead of pulling over, the driver sped away, heading south on High Ridge Road before turning onto Bradley Place. That's where the escape ended. The street had been closed for road construction, leaving nowhere to go. With the vehicle trapped, both men were ordered out and taken into custody without incident. Officers searched the car and found 2 handguns inside. Back on Dunn Avenue, the husband and wife were separately shown the suspects and identified both men without hesitation. The couple was taken to Stamford Hospital and treated for minor injuries. They told reporters they were fine, but declined to be interviewed. Both men were arraigned the following day and charged with home invasion, assault, firearms offenses, motor vehicle violations, and interfering with a 911 call. The state's attorney set bond at $2 million each. For both men, freedom was no longer an immediate possibility. As of the time of this video, the case against Hayes Edmunds and Sam Audouar is pending before the Connecticut courts. No trial date has been set. No plea has been entered. Number 9. Kelvin Wei and Tyrone Anthony. At around 8 in the morning on January 11th, 2025, George Hardison opened the front door of his home on Price Street in Savannah, Georgia. He looked through the door first and saw 2 men in Amazon delivery uniforms standing outside with a package. He had no reason not to open it. The moment he did, both men pushed their way inside and demanded to know where the money was. The attack that followed lasted nearly 8 minutes. By the time his neighbor arrived, Hardison was on the floor covered in blood. The attack left him with 14 staples in his head, while the 2 men walked away with less than $100. Their names were Kelvin Wei and Tyrone Anthony. Both were from Savannah, and at least one of them had been planning this for a week. Hardison had lived on Price Street long enough to feel at home. He was 66 years old, and he was alone in the house that morning. What Hardison didn't know was that one of the men standing on his doorstep had been inside that house before, not as a delivery driver, but as a plumber. One of the men worked inside the home on Price Street just a week earlier. He walked through the rooms, saw the layout of the house, and learned who lived there. According to investigators, that visit gave him the opportunity to choose his target. 7 days later, he came back with a partner, matching Amazon uniforms and a cardboard box carrying more than just a package. Once inside, one of the men reached into the cardboard box and pulled out a weapon. Police later described it as possibly being a sledgehammer. Hardison was struck in the head and collapsed. The attack continued for nearly 8 minutes, long enough for him to scream for help, and long enough for that neighbor to realize something was terribly wrong and start moving toward the house. When the neighbor arrived, Hardison was on the floor, sitting in his own blood, his head split open in multiple places. The two men were gone. They walked out, carrying the same box they brought in. The box and the weapon inside it were never recovered. Hardison was taken to the hospital and received 14 staples in his head. Fortunately, he survived. Tyrone Anthony was 27 years old. He had a prior record that included a 2021 arrest by Savannah police for terroristic threats and drug charges. When he was arrested in early February in connection with the attack, Chatham County prosecutors said he should never have been on the streets in the first place. Kelvin Wei was 26. His story was more complicated. In 2020, Wei had been arrested and charged with the murder of a 20-year-old man named Roderick Matthews. He spent nearly 3 years in jail awaiting trial. In early 2023, a jury acquitted him on all charges. After the attack, Wei fled Savannah. Police searched for him for nearly 2 months before the USMS Regional Fugitive Task Force and Georgia State Patrol tracked him down in Hinesville, Georgia, on March 10th and took him into custody. When a marshal approached his wife during the arrest and asked her to identify the driver of the vehicle, she refused. She said she only knew his name was Kelvin. Wei was transported back to Savannah and held without bond at the Chatham County Detention Center. Surveillance cameras throughout downtown Savannah had tracked the Ford Explorer's movements the morning of the attack. Photos Wei had posted on Instagram showed him wearing his Amazon work uniform, the same clothing investigators believed was used in the crime. In April of 2025, both men appeared before Judge Brian Joseph Hoffman Jr. for a felony docket hearing. The case was bound up to Superior Court. The judge determined sufficient evidence existed to present the case to a grand jury. Both men remained denied bond. In May, the grand jury returned an indictment against Tyrone Anthony on charges of first-degree home invasion, aggravated assault, and armed robbery. Kelvin Wei faced charges of aggravated assault, aggravated battery, home invasion, and possession of a firearm or knife while committing a crime. A jury trial date was set for Tyrone Anthony, September 29, 2025. No trial date for Kelvin Wei was publicly confirmed. As of the time of this video, neither man has been convicted or sentenced. Both remain in custody, awaiting the outcome of proceedings in Chatham County Superior Court. Number 10. Charles Parsley and Kassan White. On the evening of April 21, 2010, Sandra Hackley came home to her apartment at 1159 Yonkers Avenue with her husband and 2 daughters. Her family was expecting a UPS delivery that evening. When the intercom buzzed, they let the driver in without thinking twice. What they did not know was that a second man was already inside the building, waiting near their apartment door in street clothes. Both men had guns. By the time Raphael Cornell opened the apartment door to accept the package, there was nothing anyone could do. The apartment building on Yonkers Avenue sat in a residential stretch of the city, an unremarkable address on an unremarkable evening. Sandra was 36 years old. Her husband, Raphael Cornell, was 31. Their 12-year-old daughter was home. So was their 6-year-old. The 2 men responsible for what happened that night lived together in the same housing complex on Old Mill Court in Rockville Center, Long Island, about 30 miles from Yonkers. Their names were Charles Parsley and Kassan White. They were neighbors. They arrived at 1159 Yonkers Avenue separately and on purpose. White came in through the front wearing a UPS uniform. Parsley came in earlier in street clothes and positioned himself near the Hackley apartment while he waited for the family to arrive. The lobby cameras caught both of them, White entering as the delivery driver, Parsley pacing back and forth in the lobby, looking out toward the street, waiting. When the intercom buzzed, the family let White in without hesitation. They were expecting a package, so they believe he was there to deliver. Rafael Corniel opened the apartment door to accept the delivery, and the moment he did, Parsley and White pushed through it and opened fire. Corniel was shot multiple times, with rounds striking his chest and leg. Despite his injuries, he made it out of the building and into the street, bleeding heavily. His 12-year-old daughter was also hit in the leg. In the chaos of the hallway struggle, Parsley mistakenly fired a round that struck his own partner, but that didn't stop them. Both men moved into the living room, where Sandra Hackley was. They forced her to her knees and shot her 5 times. She died, right there on the floor of her own living room. The 2 men walked out through the front door of the building and onto Yonkers Avenue. Witnesses on the street saw them get into a dark-colored pickup truck. The driver was a man named English Thomas, a cousin of Cassandra White. But there was one thing the 3 men overlooked: the wound on White's body. In the hours after the shooting, surveillance cameras at Mercy Medical Center recorded White arriving for treatment. He told staff he had been shot in Hempstead. The footage was time-stamped and placed him at the hospital shortly after the attack on Yonkers Avenue. For investigators, it was a critical piece of evidence. The 12-year-old daughter was also injured during the attack. After her mother was killed, she called the police herself. She gave investigators descriptions of both men and later identified them in court. Yonkers police launched an immediate and extensive investigation, working outward from the apartment building's surveillance footage and the hospital recording. The trail led them to Rockville Center. On the morning of May 20th, 2010, at 5:05 in the morning, a joint team of Yonkers detectives, Rockville Center Police, the FBI, and Nassau County's Bureau of Special Operations executed simultaneous raids on the suspects' apartments at the Old Mill Court complex. 2 loaded firearms, illegal narcotics, and evidence connecting both men to the Yonkers shooting were recovered on scene. Parsley and White were charged with second-degree murder and taken to Westchester County Jail in Valhalla. A Westchester County grand jury indicted both men on June 10th on charges of 2 counts of second-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, 3 counts of assault, 1 count of burglary, and 2 counts of criminal possession of a weapon. English Thomas was arrested separately and faced his own charges as the getaway driver. Parsley and White went to trial in Westchester County. In March of 2012, the jury convicted both men on all major counts: second-degree murder, second-degree attempted murder, first-degree assault, and first-degree burglary. On June 28, 2012, both Charles Parsley and Cassandra White were sentenced to 75 years to life in state prison. English Thomas was tried separately. In August of 2015, a Westchester County jury convicted him of second-degree murder and 3 other felony counts. He was sentenced to 25 years to life. The motive for the killing of Sandra Hackley was never established. Police confirmed from the beginning that the family was targeted. The reason those 2 men drove from Rockville Center to Yonkers on a Wednesday evening in April and waited inside that building for Sandra Hackley to come home was never publicly explained. Charles Parsley and Cassandra White are both serving 75 years to life in New York State Prison. Every case in this video started with what looked like a normal delivery. The people who opened those doors thought they were dealing with a delivery driver. Instead, they were letting a criminal into their home. The victims in these cases did nothing wrong. They answered the door the same way most of us would. Some survived, some didn't. If you made it this far, let me know which case stayed with you the most. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.